Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Let's get now to a conversation on using global tax cooperation to combat illicit financial flow. Now, the president has made this appeal at the Africa Caucus meeting. Joining us on this conversation virtually will be Dr. Titilayo Fowokan, who is an accountant with specialization on tax. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're good too.
Yes, and I hope the protest did not have any impact on your activities.
Members of the Fourth Estate of the Bram must do a bit to ensure that you are well informed as well as other Nigerians. So we'll find a way around it.
Yes, and we'll get there.
Because hopefully we will. Now, getting to the conversation, tackling illicit financial inflows using global tax cooperation. Now, this is a cooperation that the president is seeking and is made an appeal at the African Caucus. Now, what's your take on the president appealing for this cooperation?
Okay, I think it's a right movement in the right direction. We've always relied on the developed economies to help us solve our African problems. Until when we come back and realize that we have what it takes to solve our African problem our own African way, we will still keep relying on this, and this will not give us the result that we expect. This is a movement in the right direction. As far as I see it, we have a lot that we can get within our African environment. We may not know that we have resources that we can also showcase to show that Africa is not as bad as is being projected. So this is an opportunity for us to actually look inwards and see how best can we work together as a body and solve our common problems. And I think this discussion is coming at the right time when there's a lot in the country, there's a lot of pressure across African countries. We see what's happening in Kenya, we see what's happening recently in Nigeria. We are having so many other news about what's happening in other African countries. So it's a right step in the right direction, and it's coming at the right time. The only thing is that we have to ensure that we get it right. Because once we miss the opportunity to get it right, then we may not achieve the result that is expected. So I think it's, I've looked at all the things that have been proposed. Fine, we have a lot of illicit flow from Africa to this other place. So when we go to these developed economies for assistance, and that is where the funds that are flowing from Africa are warehoused, what do we expect? I remember some time ago, we talked about Abacha loot. I'm not sure if we recovered everything. So we need to start thinking and looking inwards and address our African problem, our African way. Thank you.
All right, let me acknowledge. Good to see you again. What
Thank
a good
you.
day to have you join us once again. Now, one of the critical issues that was raised at this African Caucus meeting has to do with the issue of illicit flow of funds to Africa. Now, I would like you to give us a picture of some of the critical issues here, the peculiar challenges in Africa as regards combating this illicit flow of funds. And then what are some of the expectations from this kind of meeting? You know, the meeting is over. What are your expectations now as regards how to tackle this kind of development in Africa?
Thank you very much. But when we talk about illicit flow of funds, one of the things that has made this to really stay for a long time is the fact that we don't have good tracking system of transactions that flows within our economy. We also opportunities that are created whereby people can do underground economy and nothing is being tracked. The incomes are just moved out of the country. investment vehicles are created in different locations, and these, we don't have the capacity to actually go after these investments and be sure that we get our own fair share of tax. Let me be a bit specific. Our own fair share of revenue that should be used to develop our economy. The OECD decided to come up in 2013 with the base erosion and profit shifting. Even though it's for developed countries, the benefit is more for Africa, because this is a way of tracking fund flow out of Africa from legitimate business. But we also have other things that our people engage in. We have things around smuggling. We have things around some corrupt activities that goes on, and the funds that come from these activities escape the net. But with the advent of technology, with moving with the tides, closing loopholes, gaps in our regulatory system, and also being sincere. I always say that if we treat Nigeria as our project, we would be able to jointly deal with the issue of illicit fund flow. If I see someone doing what is wrong and I see that is affecting me and generations that are coming, and I don't want that to continue to perpetuate, I would voice out. But if we don't see it as our project, then when we see activities of underground economy, we see activities of backdoor transactions that are ripping off our country of the revenue is due, ripping off our country of the provision of social amenities to make the life of people better, putting a strain on our country, on the foreign exchange, on everything, then we are not actually helping out. And that is where the problem is. Until when we decide not to be selfish about the Nigerian project, we may not be able to address this. For these funds. There are a lot of projects that sometimes around 2017, Nigeria tried to say, okay, we want you to declare your asset voluntarily, declare your income voluntarily, wherever you may have put them. And all this made some improvements in the level of revenue generation, which we expect to also translate into economic development. But we need to also look inwards and see how best do we make use of these little funds that we are able to revenue generate, to make the life of citizens better. With the recent removal of subsidy, exchange rate pressure, the pressure on the citizens are getting worse. And the more we are able to look at how to solve the problem and bring down the pressure, the more we are able to keep the country under control, and the more we are able to get the people to trust the government. So illicit fund flow has been there before now. Efforts have been made to curb it, but there are still leakages. So the best way I would advise is that government should look inwards and be decisive. There must be that political will to really we see a lot of drugs that are being perpetrated through the Nigerian borders. So these are also people that there's a lot to be done. And I think when we look at our own African problem, we can easily help each other to ensure that within Africa, before you can even say you want to get this out of the African environment, you would have been cut off at one point or the other. And getting the cooperation of the international bodies would also help. They are able to do something in this area. Not that we take everything and we don't look at our peculiarity, but we look at it and we now apply to our peculiarity and think of how best. We say there's an adage that says that thieves know how to track thieves. So Africa knows how to track themselves when it comes to things like this, but we don't want to speak out. The political will to address this needs to be there. Thank you.
All right. Now that Africa is speaking out, at least the president has asked for global cooperation. Now, when we talk about illicit financial flows in Nigeria, it is reported that about $15 billion annually is lost to this. And that's this money that could have helped the Nigerian economy. Aside from illicit trade that happens, that's perhaps the funds do not get into the financial system, so it's not on record. There are also issues of trade misinvoicing and currency misinvoicing. What can be done to tackle these aspects?
Okay, when we talk about trade misinvoicing and currency misinvoicing, we should also understand that there's no action that does not have people behind it. And I'll still come back to the Nigerian project. For this to happen, there would have been an internal support, and there would have been a benefit that anybody is getting before they could do that. Transparency is key. Leveraging on technology is key. But one thing is, even if we leverage in technology and this thing still does not pass through the system so that it can be tracked, we are still going to lose out. So there's need for honest discussion within the African setup. Each country needs to do an honest assessment of, are they ready at interception of oil, petroleum products that are being taken across the border, interception of cannabis, interception of this and that and that. It means we have what it takes to check these things. So we need to have the willingness to address it so that the lives of the people can be better for it. So I think African leaders need to come together this problem. Are we ready to give what it takes to make sure that we solve this problem? And until when that honest assessment is done, all the meetings we do will not have effect. So I think it is high time for us to call a spade a spade. There's food insecurity, there's life insecurity, there's governance issues. If we try to put everything and we don't address these basic things, we are still not going to achieve the result. If we do things the same way, we cannot expect a different result. So I think it's high time for us to be very honest with ourselves, leaders to be honest with themselves, look inwards and see every country within the African continent as a we project. We want it to be better. We want to leave a better future for our children unborn, so that when they come, they will not cause anybody that have gone ahead of them. So that's where I see this willful act coming in. All these meetings can only have effect if there is a genuine intention, which is action to address these issues, to block loopholes. We need to block the loopholes. We need to get our security officers, our immigration, our customs to be on their toes, to be up and doing. I see Nigeria as for everybody and as a project that we must protect and make sure that it delivers on promise that we have given to the citizens.
All right. As a follow-up to the issues
Thank you.
raised earlier, you talked about, identify some of the leakages in the system. Now, the vice president was at this meeting representing the president to converse for international collaborations. Now, in identifying and even managing the loopholes in the Nigerian financial system, what kind of collaboration do you think Nigeria should seek as regards international help in tackling some of these loopholes you've talked about?
I think, first of all, we should start from the leveraging on technology. Data is key. And if we make sure that there's nothing we're doing that does not pass through the digital system, it can be tracked. Because we now have experts who are experts in this area. We cannot be doing business with each other and allowing it to go through. You can even do business without physical presence now. So if we're able to do, if there's possibility of doing business without physical presence, that means we have to move over to leveraging on digital economy, digital platform. Quite a lot is going on in digital economy. Do we have the resources? So I believe that there should be some more of agreement as to how we can report or track things that pass through each of our countries and have consistent discussions. Each of our, for instance, our tax authorities, I know we have Africa Tax Administration who are coming together to look at how best they can close this. Is also an area where we can also address some of these things for things that move physically. Going digital is a way to address things that go through the digital economy so that before they even get there, we are ahead of them. And it requires investment in technology. It requires building skills around this. We have quite a lot of youth that have energy, that have skills that we can harness, make them to be more productive than to be on the road. When they are fully engaged in productive activities, we might say we are giving student loan. For me, it's good, it helps them, but loan is something you're going to pay back. But why can't we look for a way of ensuring that they are involved in productive activity and these policies are tracked? Because a lot of policies of government, interventions of government end up being truncated by some people. So we need to also have a way of ensuring that policies of government are not just mere policies documented or they are followed. We have a problem with monitoring and evaluation. So if we come up with any intervention to address these loopholes, we must also monitor. We have talked about the banking system, making sure things pass through the banking system. I've talked about our tax laws. I've talked about our borders. I've talked about our customs to be sure that you can't just get the do. So that whichever way you want to come to circumvent the post, to make sure that do things behind the door, you would always meet some of the government, and we meet government there, and they'll be able to track and get what belongs to the country back to the country. Thank you.
In this meeting, there was a mention of the need for cooperation among nations to ensure that you have proper tax reforms. Now, you're aware of what the present administration is doing as regards creating a better template or framework for tax administration in Nigeria. Now, in this aspect, what kind of collaboration would you expect from the federal government as regards handling tax administration in Nigeria better? And looking at the present reforms that are being embarked on, what are your observations about some of these reforms? And then, as an expert in this area, I want you to do a critical assessment of these reforms and what will become of them in months to come.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have started working on reforms, and this meeting has come up. So what we need to do now is to check how does the outcome of this meeting impact the work that is currently being done. 2019, we've been seeing consistent is more of a more holistic reform coming from the point of view of looking at the tax incentives that we already have, how effective have they been, going down to looking at our laws, what are the provisions of the law that are no more relevant to today's world, how best can that be amended, and up to interventions that will make businesses to be able to survive. And it's when businesses are able to generate profits, that's when you can talk about tax collection. So the first is survival. The first is businesses to be able to thrive within the Nigerian economy. The discussions will also help our current reform that is going on. For instance, we have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that have been existing. Unfortunately, we lost being the, I think, headquarter. So we lost it to, I think, Ghana or so. So we need to first of all look at, are there things in this agreement that would help to facilitate both the decision at the caucus meet as well as what we're currently doing in our tax reform. For instance, when you talk about treaty, we are having treaties with developed countries. I think we have with the likes of the UK and have been existing. But when you look at the Africa Treaty Network, is very, very, in fact, maybe one of, there is even none, maybe only South Africa. But this is not going to help us if we really want to keep things within our African environment and solve our problem the African way. So we might need to be looking at how best can we have some intra-Africa trade agreements. Then also looking at the exchange means of exchange, currency of exchange. We rely so much on the US dollar. I'm happy when the president says sell crude at naira rather than dollar. So that brings that pressure on the dollar. This has been a source of problem. So the tax incentives or tax reform should now look at what are those areas that will make the life of Nigerians better. Quick wins. I know I will say something about the chairman of the fiscal committee said he looked at quick wins, and then there were so many interventions that came out in their first 30 days, and that has been happening again and again. So it will be good for our reform to continue to assess those things that are going on, industries that are matured, that should be out of the incentives. Look at the businesses that are just coming up, very young businesses that should be encouraged, and they should be given phased incentive. What I mean by phased incentives is at the point when they are we want to grow that sector, we're looking at power, we're looking at health, we're looking at education, we're looking at agriculture, identifying those industries, giving them targeted incentives, monitoring and evaluation of those incentives. Once we achieve the objective, the economic objective, and they can sustain and they can continue to sustain that trend, then we can decide to look inwards and say, where else do we need to intervene? So our reform should not be once and we go to sleep. It should be continuous. As we see things change, things are also changing in the tax environment. We have to talk about data. Do we have data of businesses that operate in the country, individuals that have flows around the country? These are also an area. And I know this is one of the things that the tax reform committee is looking at, having data. Data speaks a lot. And with the data, you can actually get this reside. So this is very areas that we need to develop, encouraging them to come up. A lot has to be done on security so that farmers, everybody can be able to do their business. Where there's no income, there's no time. We can't even talk about tax incentive. When you give tax incentive to an industry and they're unable to operate, then what is the essence of the incentive? So we should be more focused on targeted incentive, first on a phase-by-phase basis. And as soon as those objectives are achieved, we move to the next phase. Thank you.
All right. Looking at the cooperation that the president is seeking from other African countries, because he calls this a common challenge for African countries, what sort of cooperation will be needed to tackle this? Would it have to be information sharing, data management? And then looking at the informal sector, what role is the informal sector playing in illicit financial flows?
When you talk about cooperation, I think our cooperation is not only one way. Data management, information sharing is the first. Data management also flows through. When you share information and the information is not sufficient for you to be able to make your deductions, and be able to know what and what and what is beneficial to your country, even we say it's a common problem, then we have not achieved. Now, if we have trade with each other within Africa, we can track it. We can know how it goes, we can know which country. And if we have any African country having some transactions or some trade agreements with other countries, other developed, other multinationals, and we share this information, so when they get to your own country, you already have pre-knowledge. So you know what has happened in the other country. You can actually prepare yourself so that when this happens in your country, you know what to do. And that's where I think the cooperation is coming from, is addressing. Now we have our Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. I still come back to that because I'm not sure we have taken full advantage of that. Now, things around Africans using African products, it's something that we can look into. When we so much rely on products that are from abroad, we are under pressure to look for dollars or for third currencies to be able to settle those payments. And this puts a strain on our own African currency. So I believe that if we're able to look into that area, then we are talking about actualization of what do we call it now? Base erosion and profit shifting is actually for our benefit in Africa. When MNEs, they do the businesses, they've actually created structures that is affecting any of the African countries. By the time information is shared, we already know where the problem is coming from. We can also protect our own end. But that has to do a lot with governments being able to know where to draw the line between encouraging foreign direct investments and getting the economic benefits. We might be talking about foreign direct investment for sectors that are underdeveloped or sectors that we don't have the requisite skills to develop, so that we can leverage on the expertise of the foreign inflow of expertise. But as soon as we're able to address that and assess that has achieved, we've opened doors for even our domestic players to be able to also fit in. Then I think we need to assess if it is enough to continue with such or to move. Then when you talk about repatriation of profit, in fact, you say you can repatriate your profit 100%, but you can if you invest in areas where there are no tax payment, then definitely you repatriate your influence around the free zone areas in terms of who invests and what are the conditions. Once you have that blanket, then we still cannot achieve this our purpose. So international cooperation should look at our special incentives, should look at Africa dealing with Africa, should look at actualizing our Africa Continental Free Trade so that we can maximize what comes here. Should look at the consumption patterns of the citizens, so that is encouraged that we should encourage our domestic business. Now, when you're talking about the informal sector, I don't think the informal sector actually contributes a lot to this illicit fund flow. Currently, I'm not sure the informal sector is even fully in the tax net. So there's some leakages from the informal sector. But if you look at the informal sector in the real sense of the informal sector, they are not structured. And the fact that they're not structured will not even make the country to be able to track what is happening within that sector. So we need to probably look at how best can we bring them in, how best can we ensure that we have the data of who those that operate in the informal sector, their contribution to the economy. They create a lot of employment. Do we have data on this? Do we have data on even the income that comes through those employment they create? And have we collected the fair share of tax on that? And with the we can move within West Africa. People can move, jobs move. Are we able to harness that movement in jobs, or we leave it for other countries to benefit? So there's a lot that we need to look at in terms of this cooperation, and then to bring the informal sector more into the tax net, into checking what they do and being able to track it. I cannot overemphasize that information exchange and data gathering, data sharing, data analysis is very, very important, especially now that most countries are going on the technology platform and digital plan. Nigeria has done some things by bringing in significant economic presence to address the digital economy to some extent, but it could be better. So our reforms should look into all these things and see how best we can take advantage of what is happening in the global economy, take advantage of the agreements within the African continent, and get our own fair share of it, and be accountable to the citizens, make sure that they get the benefit in terms of government expenditure, in terms of them the basic need to food, shelter, and right way of living. Thank you.
All right, now let's make reference to the theme for this year's meeting, which talked about facilitating intra-African trade. Now, for Africa to be able to trade within itself or among the countries that are in this continent, what kind of tax reforms or tax policy or framework are needed to ensure that the kind of collaboration that should exist between Africa when it comes to intra-African trade, what kind of cooperation is needed as regards tax template, the kind of framework that can enhance this kind of intra-African trade? Talk to us as an expert.
For us to encourage intra-African trade, we already have a platform, and that is our Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. You might be wondering why I kept on talking about this. We need to actually take the maximum benefit of that agreement. One of the policies, like if you have to encourage people not to go abroad, transfer money abroad, we need to look at special incentives for trading within Africa, such as if I have to buy something from within Africa country, bring it to Nigeria to sell, I should be given some waivers because I'm promoting the African. If somebody else do that in our country, reciprocity should be applicable, and that will make us to be able to have that exchange of trade. And then when we talk about migration of people, I know currently you can go within ECOWAS states and then you have your ECOWAS passport, but that's just within the West Africa. I know there are some other in other clusters within Africa. We need to see how we can actually make sure that this is actually broader, such that we can get transfer of skill and knowledge. Quite a lot of Africans go to the foreign countries and they do well. They are the one that is contributing the businesses. We need skills. How best can we bring back these things to Africa such that when we are able to get people to come, or we're able to get our own people to come and replicate what they do in these foreign countries in Africa, we give them some special incentives, special considerations, and we give them an enabling environment to be able to thrive. So our tax policies should be looking at encouraging activities that promote the African trade businesses. For instance, if you look at the cross-border transaction, women, though I'm not advocating because I'm a female, but I know quite a lot of women get involved in informal sector and they employ people. So where we have businesses that cross within Africa borders, our tax policies should also look at how best to encourage those type of businesses. Maybe they'll give the tax holiday. We already have tax holidays, but some of the tax holidays are too open-ended. They are not targeted at specific economic sectors. We need to now start looking at sectorial engagements, and once we are able to get activities that develop a particular sector, we should be addressing those tax incentives or tax policies that will address that. Then when we talk about our tax, we now have our tax law has said let's 0% for small and medium enterprises, but that's corporate entities. What about informal sector under the state. Are there going to be such similar reliefs? We should be looking at that for tax holidays, such that they can, but if tax returns are filed, you can track when companies are growing, when they grow, you'll be able to, but we need to also curb the tax evasion. We need to have a very way of blocking lockages, like for instance, through the banking system, and you've never filed tax returns, then that shouldn't happen. So that's why now even the bank will say, we want to see your tax clearance. Now we need to curb corruption, because if you see, you want my tax clearance, and then I go there. So any way whereby anybody engage in corrupt practices for people to underpay tax or to dodge tax payment, there should be this each of the there should be this decision on what should happen. If that should also be part of what should be happening, even though it's in the law, but there should be willpower to trigger punishment for colluding to make people to be outside the tax net. So our tax strategy should be more of encouraging the inflow of transactions within Africa, considering special incentives for people that take the bull by the horn to break those into those areas. Africa is an emerging market, so foreigners will always want to come here. But why don't we first take advantage of what is in our market, give tax benefits to that, make sure we tighten our tax return, do tax review, do tax education, ensure that people, so these are things that should be put and factored into our tax policy. Tax education, I must know what to pay, how to pay, when to pay, and the right way. And there must be monitoring. Is when we encourage voluntary tax compliance that we can now get the benefits of what is happening. So every policy we are putting in place must be addressing all these areas, and must also address the issue of voluntary tax compliance, which reduces the cost of compliance or cost of enforcement of compliance by the government. And this is what will make us to really know get a full benefit of our investment in the intra-Africa trade and these agreements. Thank you.
Now, to wrap up the conversation, the Nigerian government can only enforce compliance within its borders. Outside of Nigeria, are there any factors that could hinder this cooperation that the president is seeking?
Fine, because tax is sovereign. You can only have that within you. But I believe that the agreements would allow for mutual exchange of information and mutual assistance. Let me put it that way. The only way you can cross to implement any of your tax requirements or tax rules, or trying to enforce somebody that have jumped the tax net, is through mutual assistance. And in most of our tax treaties with the developed economies, developed countries, we have a section on mutual assistance. And this is one of the things I would expect that whatever agreement is going to be signed with any African country will also address mutual assistance. Three things are usually there: exchange of information, mutual assistance, and non-discrimination. Because once there's discrimination, then the objective of having this agreement will be jettisoned. So I believe that if this is well thought of, well crafted, and well discussed and signed, once you sign an agreement, is bound on you, is for you now to keep to it. If I'm sure that if my business comes to your country, you treat them fairly, and you also are sure that if your business comes to my country, I will treat them fairly, it will be easy for businesses to cross borders, and to be easy for us to help each other and get to address our African problem our own African way. We know what our problems are. We just need to have the willpower to curb corruption, willpower to deal with any activities that are not acceptable, and willpower to make sure that people see good governance in what we do. With that, we can build trust within the citizens, and they can even be the one that will be exposing things that is against the country's objectives.
Many thanks, Dr. Titilayo Fowokan, who is the president of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, ACFE Lagos, Nigeria Chapter 4, being on L Exchange today.
much. Thanks, and have a good day.
So, it's a wrap on Early Exchange. Thank you for watching. The show returns tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time. Follow us on our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Leave a comment, and you can watch this edition all over again on our YouTube channel at Sook News TV and other programs from Sook News TV. I'm Blessing AJ. Enjoy your day and be safe.
And also to remember, Market Insight comes up at 11. And don't forget, the conversation continues on our social media platform as Early Exchange will return tomorrow, bigger and better. I am Femi Ayodele. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.